What's up, everybody? Welcome once again to Killer Chills, the fifth episode, I believe. We are 5 episodes into this.
Yeah, either 4 or 5, because we did
Richard Cottingham,
Israel Keys, Dennis Nielsen,
Paul Agorzo, and
Cottingham.
And we are
5th.
here now.
Wow.
So, 5, that's an accomplishment.
More than we've done with any of the other ones.
That's true. I'd say 5 is pretty good. Well, who are we covering today?
Well,
Mr. Dev?
Today we're talking about the doozy's doozy.
I think you meant the dooziest doozy.
The dooziest doozy. You know, like they say, like a mom's mom.
Yeah.
This is the doozy's doozy.
Okay.
Like even the doozies are just like that's sticky. I don't want to touch it.
Okay, that's plausible.
But today we're talking about Herbert Richard Baumeister.
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 You're not German, are you?
No, not in the slightest. The complete opposite, in fact.
Baumeister. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. He sounds like the type of hot dog.
We have some Baumeisters. You know what? I don't. That's gross thinking about this individual now, because a lot of people, unfortunately, had to see his hot dog, and that's not okay.
More people than okay. Here we go. So,
Herb the Perv.
Yeah, Herbert the pervert. Like,
this one's pretty recent, honest. Well, recent as in it's not like a 70s, 80s type of one, I don't believe. Wasn't this like
late
90s?
80s,
Late 80s.
90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah, he was born April 7th, 1947 in Indianapolis, Indiana. He had a relatively normal childhood. He was the oldest of 4 kids. And his dad was really strict, but his mom was like your average mom.
Right.
She was really nice, like really sweet lady. And his dad was like a good dad. He was just strict. Like it wasn't like he was
just your average like kind of conservative father.
Yeah, he wasn't like abusing him or anything. Like he was just kind of strict. And growing up, Herb was very awkward and shy and timid, and he was just weird. He was weird, dude.
He's just a weird kid. Yeah, I don't think there was any signs of abuse. There were no kind of telltale signs from a parental aspect. That he was going certain ways. Not until later, a little bit later in his adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
But he was dissecting things. He was killing animals from an early age.
Yeah, basically what started that is he was just walking home from somewhere, and then he found a bird that I guess was hit by a car, and he was just intrigued by it, and he was just staring at it, and then he started pressing on its stomach, and then he pressed really hard and his fingers went in, and he could feel like the maggots and stuff inside the bird.
That's
and then
the day that changed him.
Yeah, he got
excited.
He got excited, and one of his friends came up and was like, "Hey, Herb," and then he just grabbed the bird and put it in his pocket. And then
'cause that's what you do.
Yeah, that's what any normal person does.
That's what you do.
I you know what? Yeah, I guess. But he went to school. I think it was like the next day or either later that day. And he put the dead bird on the teacher's desk when the teacher wasn't looking.
Do you know what grade he was in? Is this like late middle school?
It was like
maybe
I think like
5th or 6th?
4th to 5th grade.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. I didn't see exactly, but
maybe when he was just starting to go through puberty.
Yeah, he was still like really young. And then after that too, he just got up one day and just decided to relieve himself on the teacher's desk.
This poor teacher, man.
Yeah, no, like
Like,
that teacher went through hell, dude.
yeah.
I mean, honestly, it doesn't hold a candle in the wind compared to everybody else, but
Yeah.
still, like, that's messed up.
Still pretty bad. Yeah, he relieving himself will come back around a little bit later too. He repeats this in adulthood. So
Yeah.
he enjoyed doing this quite often. And you know, God knows what else he's done in relation to wean on things, but you'll notice that's gonna end up being a thing of his.
I mean, it's going to get weirder. Here's the thing. I know it's already been weird, but it's just going to get worse. Like, hold on to your socks for this one, because
It's the dooziest doozy coming up.
so when he gets into university, there's a football game, and he's starting to, like, try to make friends. He's trying, but, like, missing by a long shot, because he's talking about how he wants to taste like human urine.
Yeah. And this is at Indiana University, right? IU.
Yeah.
So he
And
stayed here. He stayed there.
everybody's just like, whatever you're into, man. Like, that's weird. That's not how you introduce yourself. You don't want to be like, hi, I'm Herb, and
Yeah,
I want to taste your pee. Like,
So he kind of got a little bit of excitement on telling people, or
Yeah.
maybe having people be
he kind of,
taken back by it.
he kind of did, get a rush from telling people that. But there was a football game that he was going to, and then one of the girls that he was friends with needed a ride there, and some of her friends were on dates, and he showed up to pick them all up in a hearse, and he wore a chauffeur's hat, and then he was, like, zooming to the game, like, just driving terribly, and then, like, the lights from the hearse were flashing, like, cars were pulling over because they assumed it was, like, for an actual funeral,
Right.
and everybody in the car was just like, I just want this day to end. Like,
That's what you get when you go out in the town with Herb the Perv.
yeah.
Which,
And then, like, it doesn't get much better than that. Like, he kind of dropped out of college and then kind of did some odd jobs as, like, a paper boy for his dad, because his dad was one of, like, the head people of one of the newspapers over there. So it was a pretty big, like, job at that time, because keep in mind this is, like, the 70s.
right.
70s, 80s. So it's getting a little big.
Really until he married. I think that he really starts to make a name for himself.
Yeah, so before he got married too, this is when, like, he's talking to everybody at work and everybody's like, yeah, this dude's weird. And then he's on his boss's desk.
Oh, there it is again. There it is. That's
And
yep.
I think at this time he was working at the DMV.
Oh,
And
it was on a letter of resignation, right?
so the first,
Or
okay, this
kinda.
happened more than once, which is the thing. So the first time it was just on his boss's desk. He's just like, hey, don't do that.
Don't do that.
And then there was a letter, I think it was to, like, a state senator. It was like an important
Oh.
letter to somebody important.
Right.
And then he peed on that. And then they were like, yeah, you're fired.
You can't do that. It's kind of generally looked down upon.
I would say you probably shouldn't do that at all.
Right.
But luckily for everybody listening to this, as far as I know, this is the last bit of urine talk.
yeah.
It's done now. And then, he shortly before he got fired, he got married. His wife was a really nice lady. She was very trusting of him. And this actually kind of goes to the downfall
Yeah.
later.
She was pretty loyal to him.
Yeah, her name
even-
was Juliana, and they got married in 1971. She was super loyal to him, and they ended up having three kids. But she would later come out to say that they had only
This is
had-
crazy.
Yeah, they'd been married for about 15 years, and they only had sex 6 times, and she never saw him nude because he would always go and change in the bathroom.
Right. He was a never nude.
Yeah, he would always go and change in the bathroom, wear pajamas to bed, and it got to the point where she was getting a little
Yep.
frustrated with it, but she still never went and like cheated on him or anything like that.
She'll end up being very loyal, as we'll see here as the case kind of plays out. She was loyal up to the last day, but so 6 times. That means 3 out of those 6 times they actually made a kid.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and he wasn't the most present father in the world.
No.
I mean, he was there, like he did what he could for his kids, but they were not his like greatest accomplishments because him and Juliana both had big aspirations to start their own business. And basically what they did was start a
like a
clothing,
thrift store.
Kind of like a thrift store, but they like donated the clothes. It was called like a Save-A-Lot. And he was big like in giving back and helping out the community. And so once things started to get real with him, he the whole community was just kind of like shook by it. They were like,
right,
really? And it just got weird and weird and weird. But his wife was just like a good mom. It's weird because similar to Dennis Nilsen, remember how we were talking about Dennis Nilsen and Twinkie, how they would have like those home videos and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
How Dennis would kind of like make fun of Twinkie for like looking certain ways and calling him fat.
Right.
And this and that. Herb would kind of do that to his wife, but his wife was the one that was just being like recorded. So Herbert was the one that was kind of filming everything, but would make those like offhand calls. And they would always try to make plans with people, but he would be like, no, Julie, we're not going to do that. We're going to do it my way or the highway.
A little commanding.
Yeah, very commanding, very short, and kind of rude. He was just really rude.
Was he ever, after in his adolescence, was he ever put in psychiatric care?
Yes, so
that's what I thought. I vaguely remember something about him at least showing some kind of sign, like a red flag, in his adolescence.
So one of the things is like he had kind of a stutter growing up,
Mm-hmm.
and he was kind of insecure about that, which is why he was kind of like withdrawal from everything. And his dad was always just like, you can work through this.
Right.
Yeah, no, so basically in his adolescence, he had kind of the stutter. I mean, it got better as he got older. Like, there's not really a cure for anything like that.
It kind of goes away on its own.
Yeah, it either goes away or it doesn't. Like, I know a lot of people back then in the 70s would use, like, tongue twisters.
Yep.
To kind of help work through that. And it works for some people. It doesn't work for everybody. But that's neither here nor there. And because he was so weird and withdrawn, his dad kind of got him checked in to psych ward, and they had thought that it was schizophrenia, but they were like, he doesn't show really any signs of it.
Right.
Like the split personality disorder, he doesn't really show anything like that. But
and he won't really show any of that throughout his later life.
Yeah, his dad was like a big religious Catholic.
So
and
he probably just got sent there out of like first choice, like, you're going to the psych ward. My boy's stuttering. The devil did it.
More or less, yeah, but
that kind of thing.
What I will say about that, it's like, because keep in mind too, his parents are going to find out about the dead bird, the urinating.
Right.
He's doing weird things to begin with. It wasn't necessarily like just stuttering. And I mean, even the neighborhood kids here and there would like go and tell their parents certain things that he would do. And then those parents would tell his parents. I don't know exactly what it was. I couldn't find that. But it was just like a lot of like, average neighborhood talk.
Right.
And his dad kind of at one point just had enough of it and decided to get him sent there. And then he came out and they were like, he should be fine, and they were wrong.
Very wrong. So, yeah, I think he won't continue to show any type of signs of schizophrenia later on throughout his crimes. Even this man was just a pervert. That's what I believe. He didn't try to blame it on anything else. He wasn't hearing voices, to my knowledge. He wasn't seeing things.
Mm-mm.
The guy just had a sex problem, and then he kept his, he was gay, he kept his homosexuality from work, from his spouse, from his friends. It was something that I think also reflective of the times. Probably he wasn't allowed to express that side of him, which we do see a lot of in serial killers at this time. Is they're struggling because they're suppressing their sexuality. There's not really an outlet for them to be free. Doesn't mean it's an excuse, but it was definitely harder for them, and they might not have had access to a lot of the things that can help individuals now, So,
and another thing that came up around that time with him too, he was big into LSD.
Oh yeah,
and
he got
marijuana,
into some drugs. Yeah,
but every single investigator that worked that case was like, that would not alter his mind that much unless he already had pre-existing issues, which he clearly did.
If he's getting aroused at dead birds and peeing on desks and just all of that, that's a pretty telltale sign of it might be a little weird.
And it was, everybody always tried to give him the benefit of the doubt with a lot of stuff because he was such a good, community figure. You can even find, you showed me earlier, that news.
The Indianapolis news coverage of him talking about a dead, raccoon on the side of the road who got, the people that paint the lines on the side of the road. This goes for it shows kind of how the times have changed. This news station was reporting on a raccoon dead on the side of the road that the workers spray painting the lines on the road couldn't take the time to move it, and they just sprayed right over the raccoon. That was their news story.
To be fair,
it's
the 80s.
Small town, not small town, but Midwest America. That that would upset all the conservatives. Oh, they got to do a better job at making those lines, and they could just get out of their car and move that raccoon. And then Herb's out here just going, well, it's a shame that that animal had to meet a fate like that. And
I love how one of the top comments was quoting that line.
Yeah.
And then
serial killer.
Yeah,
basically how the animal didn't deserve a fate like that. And I was like, whoa.
And the best part about that is the fact that he's already killed a handful of people.
At that point, it's actually pretty close to his arrest or his accusation, as we'll see. So it was a little bit towards the end of his crimes, but he's getting interviewed about this, and he's talking about the death of an animal when this man has literally committed upwards of maybe 20, 30 homicides. So
yeah,
you gotta love them Midwestern loving that he had to show.
And the thing about all the victims too is there's been 8 that have been confirmed, but there's so many more. There can be upwards to 30 to 40 victims.
Yes.
But we'll touch on later, we're not going to end up getting the answers to that. We probably never will.
Yeah, he did the same thing Israel Kayes did.
Yeah.
So. Yep. But as we'll see, there's a connection between the crimes of Herb here and another unsolved case that really fascinated me. The I-70 Strangler, the I-70 Strangler, that case. There has been a link between Herb and that case, which there are 12 known victims. And there's actual, evidence we'll dive into a little bit here coming up as we get more into the actual killings of Mr. Herb, the Perv.
All right, yeah, so it's a good place to leave off on and get into the nitty-gritty of it.
The real meat and potatoes of what this man is known for.
The real sausage to the bun. But yeah, some of these murders are so weird. Like, there's not a whole lot of detail about really any of them out there.
No. Yeah, and a lot of it is because his murders weren't discovered until after the fact. So it wasn't really until his wife got a little suspicious of things, and he was actually, after the story that Dev here is going to tell us, it wasn't until after this story that things started to break. His wife got a little suspicious. The police started questioning him, and then eventually she would consent to a search of their house, which is a whole other center point of this story. The house itself was called Fox Hollow Farm, and it is basically the product of their wealth that they acquired. I was thinking of a different word, but the wealth that they acquired through the whole Save-A-Lot, the owning of the Save-A-Lot stores. I think they own 2 of them. So they were able to amass a bit of a small little fortune, and the house that they bought, Fox Hollow Farm, is still around today, and you can go see it, and it's pretty big. It's wealthy on a nice plot of land.
Is that the one with the indoor pool?
Yes.
Okay.
That's where
so that's the main house of the story.
That's where a lot of this takes place. That's where it's all centered around, apart from the I-70 issue that we'll bring up a little bit later. But yes, this Fox Hollow Farm that he and his wife and his family bought, like I said, it was on a pretty well-to-do area of land, and the actual house sits right here, and then as in a lot of Midwestern homes, some of them back up to little creeks, This house actually backed up to a creek that had a grassy portion, and then it led off down into like a little wooded area right by a creek. So it had a little bit of land to it. But as we'll see here, this is where he would place a lot of the victims, essentially.
Yeah, and once we get into kind of the story that I'll tell, I'll kind of go into some backstory with some things here and there. But his wife at this point wasn't really suspicious. She was just more of a... She kind of felt like she was losing her husband in a way once things started to get kind of real. But right now, she still doesn't suspect a thing.
Right. And, he was spending a long time away after work. He would, work long hours, quote, long hours. He wouldn't always be around. He wasn't very present. So we'll start to see that she starts to get a little worried, starts to ask questions, until one instance that I believe happened prior to the story you're about ready to tell. Is that there were, I cannot remember if it was one of their kids or if it was her. They were doing something in the backyard. I think it was the kid. It was the kids.
Yep.
The kids were playing in the backyard down by the creek in the little wooded area, and they came back and they found like bones.
And this
like
is
a
just
femur
like
or something like that.
Shows how trusting his wife was, because I feel like any other person would have been like, okay, something's going on here.
Right.
But they found bones back there, and she was waiting for Herb to get home.
Yes.
And then she had asked Herb about and was like, yeah, there's a skeleton back there.
Yes.
And then he was like, oh, it's just one of my dad's like science.
Yeah, and he said that he didn't
skeletons.
want anybody to get the wrong idea, so he buried it.
Which is like
Like,
gives
what?
you more of the wrong idea.
I'm like, wait a minute.
I feel like if you wanted to, I'm not trying to pump ideas into anybody's head, but I feel like if you didn't want to give people the wrong idea, you show and be like, hey, honey, look at this sweet skeleton I got from a Halloween store.
Right. And it was a full, yes, you're right. It was a full skeleton. It wasn't just bones. I think they actually found a body, like his kids, I think, were the ones playing. And then he did say that I can't. His dad or someone worked in at the university.
It was his dad.
And and it was supposed to be like a medical project,
Yeah.
and I think he wanted his wife to believe that it was, it's typically when you have like biology or anatomy classes or anything like that, they'll bring in a cadaver for, people to study on. And I think this was one of those cases where he wanted it to be like, oh, well, that was a cadaver that was, used for research or something like that. And that's all it is. And I just didn't know what else to do with it, so I buried it. That's already alone creepy. Like,
It's
that's just creepy.
I'll let you get into some of these other victims here before I kind of go into that story, because that's one of the later ones.
Okay, well, I mean, technically, this all centers around that story because these victims, none of them are really known about or what
You're
happened.
right.
So, if anything, I would say let's hear the story first, because these victims, there aren't really stories to go along with them, because as we'll discover, he doesn't really get the chance to talk about them. So these victims will end up just being identified. So there won't be any detail about how they were killed necessarily. The one glimpse that we get into his MO, how he did things and what he typically enjoyed, or how he enjoyed it, or how he liked things to go, is from this story. Because this is the one where I think he repeated this MO, and that was the same fate that each one of these other 8 victims met.
Yeah, so with the skeleton that was found in their yard, we're not entirely sure exactly which one of these victims it is. But later on, we'll kind of tap into his MO a little bit. But the victim that I'm about to talk about right now is Roger Allen Goodlett. And he was killed at the age of 33. We don't know exactly when. And we don't exactly know how. But from what we could think,
we have a good idea of
we have
what
a
happened.
good idea that he was probably strangled.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know exactly what else had happened. So basically, the whole story to this, and it's probably going to be a little bit of a long one, because there's so much to this story. And with this story too, this man helped everybody so much.
If it wasn't for him, he probably would never have been even suspected.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, Herbert had met this guy named Tony Harris at a bar. It was one of the gay bars that Herb was kind of frequenting. However, when Herb had met Tony Harris, he actually told him his name was, I believe, Brian Smart.
Brian Smart. That was it.
And I almost said Brian Stars, but I was like, no, that's that one
That's
music scene clown
yeah.
interviewer that
definitely not him.
yeah, those interviews all aged beautifully.
Yeah.
But anyways, so for the sake of the story, I'm going to start calling her Brian, so there's not 3 names being tossed back and forth here. He's just going to be named Brian for the sake of the story. But keep in mind, it is Herb. So this is one of the things that what they assume that these victims dealt with was that Herb had different aliases. We don't know what those aliases were because Herb is dead, and obviously, unfortunately, the victims are.
Yeah, we don't have anything to go by.
But the majority of the investigators believe he had these different aliases. But anyways, Brian here had met Tony at one of the bars that they frequented. And then Tony was kind of like looking over at Brian and was like, kind of like checking him out. Not checking him out like the you're cute checking him out. It was like checking him out like,
right, like, what kind of character are you? What are you doing here? Like
kind of like, I guess more of like pressing him in a way.
From my knowledge, Herb, or Brian, as he called himself in this situation, I believe he didn't really look the part. He kind of looked out of place at a gay bar,
Yeah.
which
Especially
each
for
his
that
own,
time.
yeah, especially for
too.
that time. But I think he kind of looked. He probably was wearing his gray suit and looked like he looked like a senator
Yeah.
almost. So, or just a typical businessman. He's kind of out of place. So I'm sure Tony was like, interesting, odd character.
But then the thing is that Brian had approached Tony and they were kind of chatting back and forth. Tony wasn't really feeling it because he was just getting weird vibes, but he noticed it at that gay bar because Roger was one of their regulars. Everybody there loved Roger, thought he was like the
Right.
nicest guy in the world. So when he had went missing, at this time they didn't know he had really been murdered yet. They suspected it, but they couldn't confirm it yet.
Right.
So they had a picture of Roger up on the wall, and Tony was actually very good friends with Roger. And he thought it was really weird that Brian was kind of like fixated on the picture of Roger. He was like really invested into it, like almost like smiling in a way, like almost like think if like you go on like your Snapchat memories, Facebook memories,
You see
anything
a
like
good
that.
memory and
You
just
see a good
smile.
memory and just smile.
Yep.
That's kind of what Brian here was doing.
He was just reliving the moment that he.
He was reliving the moment, and then at this point, Tony's kind of like he's uneasy, but he also has that point of like he's like I can't confirm it, but I think this is the guy.
Yep.
That killed his friend, or did something to his friend.
And Tony decides to get or grow a massive pair of balls.
I wouldn't have done
Like,
that.
yeah,
I
what
love
he
you.
does, yeah.
I love you, but I would not put myself in that situation.
What he does here is probably, I think is just him being, him and very kind of maybe, he was ballsy. He was just a ballsy dude, and he grew a massive pair of balls that night. And what he does is he decides to go up to
He
Brian.
decides to go to Brian's, not Brian's house, but Brian's house.
Right.
So basically, Brian starts kind of like chatting with Tony, and Tony's like kind of not feeling it at all, but he's like, I want to know what happened to my friend. And Brian then says, hey, do you want to come back to my place for a drink and a swim?
Oh, okay. So Dennis Nielsen's here. Back to like
I love how they all tie
this is like
into.
they all will, because it's like, you want to come back and have more drinks with me at my place?
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
Yeah. That's what he did. And so they go back to Brian's place, and Tony's just like really trying his best to keep like track of his surroundings, but it's so dark out, and because like you had just said, it was a very woodsy kind of secluded area.
Yep.
Especially back then. I'm sure there's probably more stuff there now, but back then
I'll post a picture of it.
there's not much. And they get back to Brian's house, and
He led them around the back way, because I'll post a picture of the house, like I said, but as you can see in the house, like there's the detached, and that's not detached, but it's like a separate part of the house that goes down, because it is on a hill kind of. There's this other part of the house that is a little bit further away from some of the living quarters, where his family was, because I believe his family was there.
Which was smart, because this actually threw a huge wrench into everything when Tony was trying to,
Yep.
help one of the investigators. But what had happened was Brian had told Tony that I'm an art landscaper and I'm getting ready to sell this house to this couple. They haven't moved in yet, and I've been staying at this house trying to get it ready, which was a load of baloney.
Oh yeah. And the house itself was, he purposely, they had still moved in pretty recently, and apparently they still had furniture and a bunch of stuff like wrapped up.
That's the thing that's like raised red flags with Tony here, because it was actually Herb's house. It was his own house. So it was around when they had first gotten the house, and the thing is Tony realized that very quick because he's like, there's too much stuff here. He's like, I don't believe a word this guy's saying, but he's like, I really want to know what happened to my friend. So they get to the house, and then they're around the downstairs area where the pool was.
Right.
There's just mannequins everywhere, and
They were in the pool area.
yeah.
They were surrounding the pool, which is, paint that picture. Actually, I'll post there's a photo of it. I can post a picture of the pool area.
Weird.
The mannequins aren't in the photo, I believe. I'll see if I can try to find one with them. But it is weird because there's this indoor pool, and then there's just a bunch of mannequins around. And even in like some of the closet ways in the pool area are mannequins.
And this is where things get weird. So Brian is acting relatively normal for the most part. I mean, obviously, it's normal for Brian to be because he's
Right.
just naturally weird.
He was like, I'll pour you a drink. Let's go for a swim. And, kind of the insinuation here is that we're going to have sex.
Yes.
So,
what he does is Brian goes upstairs, and it's presumed that he was doing drugs of some sort. Back then, cocaine was very prevalent, so he probably did coke. We don't know for sure, but he came back down, and he noticed that that Tony was very fixated on the mannequins. He's just like, what the hell is going on?
yeah.
And then Brian's just like, I get rather lonely down here.
Yeah, automatically.
They keep me company, which I would be
think
like,
he's
all
in
right,
the-
thank you for having me. I'm out.
I think at that point, he's in the pool already, like swimming and just trying to have a good time. And
He's trying to
just
make the
kinda
best
like,
out of a shitty
yeah,
situation.
and he's like, what the hell? Why are there so many mannequins? And keep in mind, this man only agreed to go to Brian's house, Herb, just so he could try to find out what happened to his friend.
Exactly.
That's the ballsy part here.
So the thing is, too, is Tony knows that, like, Brian is acting, like, different. Like, Tony was, like, a smart dude.
Yeah.
Like, he
he's
could tell
very
when somebody
smart.
was under the influence.
Yeah, I think he
which-
was pretty smart.
Brian clearly was. And so Tony's in there swimming. He's just like, dude, whatever. And they're swimming for give or take like 30 minutes to an hour. And then Brian has this hose that's kind of along the side of the pool. And then he just grabs the hose and he's like, I want to tell you about this thing that I've been reading about.
Oh, God, here it comes.
And it's erotic asphyxiation.
Yep.
And so if you don't know what that is,
It's, self-explanatory. People either do it to themselves or sometimes they do it to other people consensually, normally, as it is a kink. But, yeah, it's just the idea of asphyxiating yourself to the point where you don't completely black out.
but
you
you
just
get
come
close.
right to that point, and apparently your endorphins are let off, and, like, you get a rush. You get a little bit of a high from that.
And that's exactly what he tells Tony.
Yep.
And he was basically like, it's great. It's like you're getting high and you're doing it right when the person's lips turn blue. And that's when you really get off. And which, no.
Yeah.
But whatever.
No.
To each their own, I guess. Anyways, Brian goes and tells Tony about this, and Tony's just like, if I gotta do this to find my friend, I'm gonna do it.
Yep.
And so he lets Brian put the hose around his neck, and then Brian tells him to start touching himself to completion. And then once he achieved release, Brian makes Tony do it to him. And Tony did it, but Brian was in there longer than he should have been. He knew that he was doing that. He knew that he wanted that.
Right.
And then once he did that and he got to that point where his lips were turning blue, he kind of I don't know if he faked blacking out or if he actually blacked out. But either way, he either blacked out or faked blacking out. And then Tony kind of smacks him awake and shakes him awake, and then Tony just yells at him and unleashes and is like, this is how accidents happen. This is dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, things can go wrong really, really
Yep.
quick. And then he straight up says, is this what happened to Rogers or others? And it's like, he just had
ballsy,
the
man.
the most massive set of balls in the world by
Seriously.
saying that.
Yep.
And at this point, too, Tony's adrenaline's going. So it's like, I'm sure if he really wanted to, he could take him down right then and
Probably.
there off of pure adrenaline. And keep in mind, Brian's coked out of his skull. He's drunk. Probably going to be an easy fight. But
Yeah.
whatever. And Brian just completely dismisses that comment. And then he kind of, after about like 20 minutes of like Brian like calming him down and whatever, he passes out. Brian just like blacks out. We don't know if it was from drugs or drinking.
So he also
What have
Dennis
you.
Nielsen'd himself.
Exactly. And then Tony was like, now's my chance. And he starts looking
Mhm.
around here, like the house, and was like, okay, so clearly someone lives here. What he told me is a complete lie. And then as soon as he found Brian's pants with his wallet and he went to go and like pull the wallet out, he wakes up and like goes and finds Tony. He's like, hey, what you doing? And then Tony's like, oh, I was just looking around, whatever.
Yeah.
And there's just junk in the house.
Yeah.
Like
It was
this,
very junk, scattered, random things
like
everywhere
paper
around.
boxes, all kinds
Yeah.
of nonsense that, like,
Which Herb's wife, I guess, was constantly getting at him about, like, clean this place up. Things aren't being
Mhm.
done. You need to unpack this. You need to unpack this. But he used it, and I think he was keeping that so he could use the excuse of the house being ready to sell.
that was my theory too. And I agree with you on that 100%. And then, anyways, so Brian and Tony have, another conversation. And Tony's like, all right, dude, like, I'm just going to go. Like, I'm out.
Dennis
And then
Nielsen again.
Brian was like, okay, well, I'd love to see you again in a couple of weeks. And then Tony, again, with just this massive set of balls, is like, okay, and they plan on meeting up at the same spot. Tony goes and he's waiting, and then Brian never shows up. And at this point, because this is later on, probably past some of the murders, like, Herbert's kind of in the spotlight again. And so
Right.
people are starting to get some suspicions about him. And then there's an investigator. I can't remember what her name was. I think it was Melinda.
I'll find the name and I'll post it.
Yeah, because she was a key
But-
part in this. She was a huge reason why they were able to, pin things on him.
Right.
But Tony told her about everything, and then she's like, I need to know everything about this.
Right.
And then he tried his best to lead her there, but because
It was dark out.
Brian, Herbert, whatever you want to call him at this point, it was dark. He tried his best to, like, lead him up to where the house was, and he got him
Pretty close. Yeah,
Like, if
from what I
they just
remember.
would have went like a little bit farther, they probably would have been there. But he was like, I know it was in this area.
Right.
This is what he looks like. He was able to do all the other stuff, but that's just kind of what happened with that story. But that story is so crucial to all this because of that detective.
Yes, and it eventually does lead them to Herbert. And I think because there's only when I pull the map up, there's only a certain amount of houses.
At the
And
time,
I
I think there was only maybe like
And
3 or 4.
I think Tony was actually able to pinpoint which house it was.
Mhm.
And that's when they kind of, all right, so they go up, they ask, hey, Herbert, knock on the door. Herbert answers, hey, can we ask you some questions about some of this things that we've been hearing, da-da-da-da-da. In his mind, he probably was like, Tony.
Right.
Tony.
And then
'Cause
he
yeah.
says no.
Yeah, he says no. Him and his wife both, they don't allow the police to search their property at first. But the police, they're now pretty much zoning in on Herbert just because there is a lot of evidence pinpointing that Tony brought back, that circumstantial evidence that would kind of link Herbert to Roger's death.
That too, and the fact too, a lot of these gay bars that Herbert was frequenting, a lot of the bartenders are like, hey, once I saw this dude leave with this guy, I haven't seen this guy ever again.
Yeah.
And so they're going and saying that, but because at that time in the gay bars, it wasn't San Francisco, it wasn't like a big thriving gay community.
Right.
They kind of dismissed
It was in the Midwest.
Yeah, and they dismissed it, so they didn't really care until Tony went to the detective with this story.
And the information.
And she was the one that was like really like an advocate for the LGBTQ community back then to really try and help them out.
Exactly. So I think we'll get into the capture here, or not capture, or the demise of Herb the Perv.
The demise and the rest of his victims.
Yes.
And again, too, I know we say this every episode, but I really want to drive this point home. LGBTQ community, we stand with you. If you ever need anything,
100%.
reach out to us. You're always welcome to us. We love you. And
It's all about love here.
that's all we care about. We just want you to feel welcome. But yeah, we'll go into his victims here right now. The rest that we unfortunately don't know a lot about.
Not really, but I guess we'll see how this ends. So his victims are kind of, it's interesting how this is played out. Essentially, once Tony brought the accusations, and they initially denied a search of their grounds, his wife got a little bit more and more suspicious and a little bit more worried of the situation growing at hand. His behavior began to deteriorate. He was staying out later until eventually she started to subtly believe that there might be some truth behind Tony's claims, and that there might be a correlation between Tony and Herb. So eventually she reaches a breaking point.
Because that's when she started to think about the skeleton, too, that
Yes.
had been found.
Yeah.
What could have been a couple of years prior to this, we don't really know.
Right. Anyway, it starts building to a point where her loyalty's really been being tested, and she eventually gives in, allows a search of their property, and is also, I believe she put in a motion for divorce.
Yeah, so actually Herb had put one in, too, so they both tried to get a divorce at the same time, but for different things and all those technicalities, but they were
Right.
different.
But at this point, the big one is that she did reach out to authorities and was like, okay, I consent to a search of the property. Now, when investigators and local authorities showed up and they did scour the property and they did a comprehensive search, they found the jackpot. They found 8 victims that were buried in his backyard, all skeletonized.
So that means it had been years at this point, too.
Right.
Those bodies have been there. And one of the things, too, is that investigator that I was talking about reached out to another one, and they had to try to acquire a search warrant first because they didn't consent to it. And that state didn't want to really waste their time on a search warrant, because that investigator that I was talking about was in a different jurisdiction.
So did they contact Julie? Was her name Juliet?
Julie for sure.
Julie. Did they contact her? And I think she eventually gave in.
Yeah, and the thing too, because it was outside of that detective's
jurisdiction,
whatever. They weren't able to get the search warrant, and then they just kind of kept pressing with Julie about it, and then she had
just
consented.
To get the consent.
But one of the other detectives that the detective I was talking about was talking to was just like, he didn't really care. He's just like, whatever. He's like, I'm ready to just go and because they had brought up the skeleton to him.
Right.
That had been found, and he was like, I'm ready to just go and tell him it's bullshit. He straight up said that too.
That's crazy.
And when he was walking around too and they started to find stuff, he stepped on something, and then he moved his foot and looked down and realized it was human teeth. And once they found the skeleton that was originally found, they shipped it off to the coroner or the lab, where they tried to do whatever type of autopsy they could do on the skeleton. They realized it was burned. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier.
Right.
It was that same skeleton, which his MO, they weren't able to tell if it was strangled, but it probably was. And then they realized it was burned because there was all the char marks on the
Right.
bones.
Right. Did was he the one? Did he get caught trying to burn a body?
I think that's the other Herbert Miller.
Okay.
Was it Herbert Miller?
Oh, I can't remember exactly, but
That was the other tricky thing.
Yeah.
There's like 3 serial killers named Herbert, and they all
yeah,
they were all
around
from
the
the
same
U.S.
time.
and around the same time, so it was tricky.
right. Well, anyways, these 8 victims are pretty much identified as John Bayer, Richard Hamilton, Stephen Hale, Alan Broussard,
I think it was Rosard.
Broussard, Jeffrey Jones, Manuel Hernandez, Rosendez, and Roger Godlet, which is the one
Mm-hmm.
that we talked about earlier, and then Michael Kieran.
So the thing too, which really kind of freaked people out, was John Lee Baird, because he was the youngest victim that we know of, because
Right.
he was 20. And so in Indianapolis too, his parents had actually put out a missing persons report, but there at that time, I don't know if it's different now, but at that time, they had to be missing for at least 24 hours until they could do a search warrant.
Yep.
And because of
per
his
usual.
age, since he was over the age of 18, it made it even harder.
Yeah.
And also the fact, because he was so young, they assumed that he was just another runaway at that time, because keep in mind, this is 70s, 80s, everybody's trying to rebel.
Yep.
So runaway cases were very normal back then.
I'd say pretty normal, yeah.
But the thing
Way more
was,
frequent than now.
after 30 days that they didn't find him, they would send them to the federal missing persons division. And then that's when they would send out their team to try to look. And because it had been after the 30 days and after the maximum amount of time that the federal division of it would look, they kind of gave up.
Yeah. They just gave up on the case. And which is pretty common. That happens a lot.
Even still now.
Yeah, now it's still prevalent. But after they found these 8 victims in the backyard, that's when all hell breaks loose. So at that point, Julie knows, oh boy, he's a killer. And the police, oh boy, he's a killer. All right. And at that point, they put a warrant out for his arrest, as per usual and per protocol. However, this man already had a hunch that they were going to be searching his property at some point, and he actually left for vacation. And what is in reality, he was fleeing.
Yeah. So because they had the warrant, I think he had tried to leave the country.
Yes.
And I don't know if he was able to or not.
It was when talks were brought up about a warrant to be organized. That's when he panicked and he started to flee. He just fled.
Yeah. He just kind of bounced, didn't really say anything to anybody
Nope.
aside from he was just going on vacation, because at this time, his business had basically folded. Like, it kind of...
Yeah, his business was already kind of going downhill, which I don't exactly know why, but it probably was just fell on hard times, and it was a happy coincidence.
Yeah, I've seen things that it's just like they just weren't making money. I've seen things that he was taking the money and using it for his own
Which he could have
personal
been.
use, which he could have been, but
A man like
who
him,
knows?
he could have been, but he flees and he drives a lot of hours actually north, and he even crosses the border into Canada. And he is driving through the night, through the days, and bowls off onto a what is it, pinery Pinery State Park. Pinery State
I
Park.
think it's Pinery.
Pinery State
I don't know.
Park.
I can barely say words good to begin
That's
with,
true.
so I'm not the
Anyways,
person to ask.
it's a lakeshore park with a little beach area on Lake Huron. And he pulls off there and he walks onto the beach, sits down, and pops himself in the head like a coward.
That's a thing with a lot of these serial killers that we'll find is there's actually a good majority of them that will either kill themselves before being captured
Yeah.
or they kill themselves in prison. And most of the time there's a handful that it is because of the guilt, but most of them, they don't want to give the victim's family satisfaction
Right.
with the fact that they were caught. And this is just my opinion with Herb. I think he was just genuinely scared of the consequences he was going to get and just
Yeah.
wanted to take the easy way out.
He just wanted to take the easy way out. I think he just couldn't handle prison life. He knew that it was all going to blow up. He knew that he was damned. He just made it quick.
Like what we had talked about with Israel Keys, like he served his sentence until the day he died of, what was it, cancer?
Israel Keys?
Or
Oh, you
not
mean Dennis-
Israel Keys, Dennis Nilsson.
Yeah, Dennis Nielsen just kept going until he...
Until he died.
yeah.
He just accepted his consequences. Israel Keys was just, it was kind of like he felt betrayed by the investigators, but he also didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of like dragging him down even further.
Right.
Which is why he chose to kill himself.
Right. And this man, and the way he did it was almost ritualistic. Like he drove straight to a peaceful area and decided to do it there. And it wasn't beachgoers ended up finding his body, which is just dumb.
So much for having a good day at the beach.
Yeah. And I was like, really? Okay. So, I mean, he did have to have a passport, which is even scarier to think about. That's another thing, like with Israel Keys. Like, we don't know how many of these killers have crossed the border and committed crimes outside of America.
Well, think about it, too, with all those other, I-70 killers that...
So that's
or
the other
speculations.
thing. Here we go on that one.
I guess if you want to touch on that a bit more, that one of the victims was, tied to him. And I'm a firm believer that Herbert was probably the I-17 killer because there's at least 30 to 40 victims.
There's presumed to be about 30 or 40. 12 are proven to be the I-70 Stranglers victims. But the one victim tying that slew of killings to Herbert is Michael Riley, who was actually seen with an individual that was able to identify Herbert at the Vogue Theater. Vogue, am I saying that right? Yeah, the Vogue Theater, which is a nightclub, and they were able to pinpoint that Herbert was there, saw Herbert with Michael Riley, and they left together. That to me is, and that was the last time they saw Michael alive, which to me is pretty much heavily circumstantial proof of Herbert's involvement in a lot of those disappearances. And then, the I-70 Strangler was a slew between 1980 and 81 where a lot of people were going missing off the I-70 right there between Indiana and Ohio. And bodies were found on the side of I-70, strangled, nude, raped, and they were all men, young men. Then they stopped, and cleverly enough, they kind of stopped when he moved into the city.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's the other thing, too, with a lot of these investigators, when they were going over all of the victims that he potentially had, they were never able to find, like, really much identification on any of the bodies because they were all nude and also, skeletonized. So
we were able to get names, though.
We were, and a big thing the reason why we do have names is because at that time they did have so many missing person reports
And dental records.
and
We're able to link them.
that was the saving grace, was the fact that they did have dental records.
Mm-hmm.
So
DNA was just starting to come about. But I to this day, I believe the I-70 Strangler is Herbert Baumeister. I believe he just changed his MO once he finally got a place that was big enough, and then he felt that he had a big enough backyard that he could just, and a pool. This guy was like, no more car fun. I don't have to have fun in the car anymore. I got a pool. And the mannequins, he actually stole from department stores, apparently.
that sounds awfully familiar, like someone else.
Yeah. Mr. Nielsen did that. Oh.
Dahmer.
And Dahmer. Yeah. They all did it, I think.
I
because
don't remember
Dennis
Nielsen
Nielsen,
doing it.
well, I don't think he ever stole one. I think he just stated that
He was
found,
aroused by him.
yes, he was aroused by a mannequin. Dahmer actually had one in his apartment, I believe.
And his dad made him give it back.
Yes, yeah.
Could you imagine
Give it
walking
back.
into a a department store and just being like, I stole this, sorry. Like,
Oh no, absolutely not. And if I ever go over to anybody's house or apartment and they have mannequins, I'm like,
they better be having their own
Hmm.
clothing line or trying
Yeah.
to be the next fashion designer.
yeah, like this
'Cause
shit
if
better
not,
be for
I'm out.
fashion. Is this just for fun? Because if it's for fun, I have questions.
Well, is there a little spout for air in it? Because if there's a spout for air, I get that. Whatever.
Yeah.
We're all boys. We joke about things. That's fine. But if it's a mannequin, that's going to be you better be making the hottest clothes of 2022 where I'm bouncing.
Yeah. So,
Better be the next Kanye.
but the strange thing, they were didn't his wife ever go down to the pool house and ever was why are there 20 plus mannequins here?
I've tried so hard to find something about that, and I didn't find a single thing.
Again, it's
But-
almost like Israel Keys' wife. You have got to see the signs here.
Well, here's the thing. With my speculations, this is just my opinion and what I think, is because she was so trustworthy,
Right.
what he could have done was been these are for our store to have
He could
clothes
have.
on
That's a
'em,
good enough excuse.
and we're keeping them here because we don't have room in the store. But it's
I'm
really,
sure
what?
the man was smart enough to come up with some.
Well, have you ever
excuse.
really been to a Goodwill or a Ross that has mannequins
Never. At least
posing
not
with
here in
clothes?
Phoenix. No, not here in Phoenix. I've
That's-
never seen a Goodwill or Dollar General with mannequins.
and it's the thing from what I kind of saw with this store was it was more of a Salvation Army type of vibe,
Yeah.
not even a Goodwill or Ross.
No, this was
I damn no. Especially here in Arizona, there's no Salvation Army store that has mannequins.
no.
Because those are all donated clothes. Why are you going to do a mannequin with a one-off outfit that you're not going to find another piece like that there?
True. Yeah, I
But
don't
it's
know.
his wife just being so trustworthy and up until the end was he would never do that. And then she was starting to be well, wait a second.
He would do that. But yeah, anyways, I guess and kind of wrapping this up is Herb Baumeister never got to see his day in court. These victims never got their day of justice, which is unfortunate and, infuriates me. But they never got to actually have someone, judged for their crimes, and that's extremely disheartening because he took the easy way out. Even though the amount of evidence against him is stacked so high, it's incredible.
I'm not a part of the law or anything, but I can see just from the victims we have here and the other ones that aren't confirmed, I could see him getting the death penalty.
Yeah. Especially, can you imagine if he did go to trial? They probably would be able to link the I-70 Strangler killings to him just based off of everything that goes into the preparation of a trial, I think there would be so much that would come out. And no, he just offed himself.
Exactly. And that's the thing, too, with a lot of these serial killers that do that, they don't want those families to have justice. However, I feel like Herb, he was just scared and just straight up a coward. And
Yeah.
I think he would rather kill himself than deal with the consequences of his actions. And that just kind of shows it. And like, again, how we were saying with, like, Israel Keys, he killed himself as a middle finger to everybody.
Yeah, I don't think Herb's was so much as a middle finger as it was just being scared and cowardly. I think he, and that's kind of shown by him fleeing. Like, he just fled. He knew the jig was up. He booked it. And I think that's what kind of proves that. Not only does that prove his guilt to any amount of degree in the case, but it also proves that he was cowardly. It proves a ton of things. So it pretty much shows that Herb was a perv. And I think even though there's not a lot of stuff in his childhood that could explain why he was the way he was, I think it was just, who knows how he got into this. There's not a lot in depth known about his childhood, other than the craziness of the peeing situation and the odd behavior and all of this. But there wasn't like a lot of instances that we could really grasp onto.
I mean, we're probably never going to know because both of his parents are deceased.
Right.
No one knows, like, no one knows where his siblings, where his children or his wife are now. No one knows. If anybody has any links to anything, let us know, because I'd be interested to see, but you're going to be hard-pressed to find anything like that.
Right. There's a few good books that I know you can read. I'll at least one that I'll share here is The Haunting of Fox Hollow Farm, and this is a whole other thing. The house is still there in Carmel, Indiana, which is a suburb of Indianapolis, and you can still go see it. You can drive by it. I know it's privately owned now, but a few years ago, the owners allowed it to be opened up to a group of ghost hunters, of all people. And they were allowed to stay a couple nights in the pool room where these crimes were committed. Because we're kind of going off of these other 8 victims. We're kind of going off that his MO was repeated. Go home for drinks from the bar. Come swim with me. You want to see my hose? Oh, no, you're dead. I'll take you out back.
And here's the thing, too.
Was repeated.
If you see this, don't go and, like, bug them to go to the house.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do that. That's not
obviously
cool.
Don't do that. You can drive by it. Just wave at it and be like, ugh, and then go on with your life.
Take your pictures from a distance.
Yeah.
Don't go up to the gate and everything because it's gated off now, right?
I think it's a gated community.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it is, I think.
But yeah, like, don't be a dick and just go and, like, hop the fence and stuff. That's not cool. And I think with those ghost hunters too, I think the owners might have actually reached out to them, right?
I think so. I read the book it was a few years ago. I'll have to I'll post a picture of it, but it's really good from what I remember of it from reading. It's pretty interesting. There are cases of while they were spending the night in the pool room, the water was splashing around and it was like somebody was struggling for help, and they go through all this whole thing and how they feel like the spirit of Herb is still there. And I'm like, ugh, I don't know about that, but it's an interesting read. There is a big whole chunk of the book that is just strictly factual about the crimes of Herb. This guy was just an evil pervert, just another one of them that took the cowardly way out, and he unfortunately joins the ranks of the scum.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I have left to say is don't trust anybody, because this guy could just be like someone else living in your neighborhood. Don't trust anyone.
Typical 80s businessman next door, like, had a family, had a wife. Because, no military service.
That was another big thing we didn't mention earlier. No military service.
No
in
military
this one.
service. This guy was just a pervert
Hey, weird.
by design.
We got 2 in a row
Two,
this
two
time.
in, two in a row, no military service. So we'll keep that going. But I think that about does it for the dooziest of doozies, which I don't even think this man was the dooziest of doozies.
He pissed on his teacher's desk.
Okay, yeah, that.
And his boss's desk.
Yes.
And a letter at work. He's pissed in public 3 times.
Yeah, he got a wee. He had a wee problem.
It's not like he has like a weak bladder or he's just drunk and pissing on walls. We've all done that. We've all been there. But come on.
Yeah. He that was just his little, I guess you can call it his depraved fetish in that instance, but I don't even really see him as someone that did it for the sense of power.
He did it because he thought it was funny.
Yeah, which is even worse, I guess. Like, he just thought it was funny. He just did it because he could. And, the scary thing is we really only have Tony's account for how he committed these crimes.
Yeah, that's the other thing that we're going to be really hard-pressed about is just finding any real information on a lot of this, because it's a lot of he said, she said stuff. But again, the investigator I was talking about, will make sure to put her in here because she was like the real MVP with all of this.
Yeah. And if it wasn't for Tony with the biggest balls on the planet, none of this probably would ever have gotten out. So props to Tony. Those balls are big.
I mean, I don't have anything else left to say.
I think that
we'll wrap it up here.
That wraps it up for Herb the Perv. Join us next week. We'll be covering another doozy.
Another doozy of some sort. And just so you all know, here at Towergate Studios, we're going to be opening up doors very soon.
Very soon.
Follow us on Instagram at Towergate Studios for updates on that. If you're coming from out of state or if you're in Arizona, let us know. We'll set something up. You follow us on our own social media accounts at Dev_friend and Tim_Franskowiak. And follow us on Spotify and all that good stuff. And we'll see you later.
All right. That does it for Killer Chills.
Stay chilly.